Once your class has congregated in their muster point, then consider do some transition exercises, especially when your class is new to being outdoors. You need to get them used to all the distractions that are there. So if you take that time to undertake a transition exercise or an immersive introductory exercise, then you'll reap back your rewards because later on those distractions won't be a problem. One of those is actually doing something called connecting. Once you've got your class established, they're standing in a ring, then you need to get them to stand still and just listen to what you're saying. Now give them time in between each instruction to do what you say, but they need to listen, not talk, and use all their senses to actually explore what's going on around them. So start first of all by closing your eyes and just breathing. And when you breathe, just try and imagine that every time you breathe in, you're taking in oxygen that's been created by all the trees around you. When you breathe out, all that carbon dioxide is being used by those trees to actually grow. Once you've started to calm down, you can then start to explore using the other senses. So start by listening. What can you hear? What's the furthest away sound you can hear? Then come a bit closer and a bit closer until the nearest sound you can hear. Then have a smell. What can you smell? Think about feeling with the soles of your feet. Can you feel the bumps in the ground beneath you? If they're sitting down, they can even feel with their hands. Also, feel the wind in your face. See how it moves as you move your face around. Lastly, get them to open their eyes and see how far they can look. What's the furthest thing they can see? And then come slowly in and in. Now, just getting them to do an immersive activity like this will get them to clock all of the distractions around them. You can give them a moment to talk about them and get it out of their system so you can then focus on the job in hand, on your learning objective, so you're not going to be distracted so much. Once your students are very competent at doing the connecting activity, then there is a progression that you can go into that allows them to do the same activity but independently, and that's called Magic Spot. So if it's safe to do so, allow your students to find a location in your school grounds or your outdoor area where they can't see another person or completely surrounded by their environment. Then they take their time to close their eyes and connect just like we did before, and they try and explore that area by sitting still and then bringing in all of those senses. Sometimes it's nice to give them a bit of pad of paper so they can jot some things down. This could be a literacy exercise, it could just be a contemplative exercise. But if you want them to create some pieces of work like a haiku or a poem, or even a piece of artwork, then giving them some paper while they go there, it gets them time to transition to the outdoor area and also to build a little world for themselves that they're exploring every time they go out. It also helps them to tune into the changes in the season if you're doing this constantly every week or so. If you want to determine what they remember from any indoor sessions or an outdoor session you did in the past, then a knowledge line is a really good idea, just to get them to remember that the learning is continuing from the inside. It's in a different location, but the learning is continuing. So for a knowledge line, you need 2 cones, one at one end and one at the other end. And you're going to stand in the middle. You need to then say either a statement or even just a definition of something that you've been doing in class. And if they understand 100% what it's about, they go to one cone. If they've never heard of it before, they go to another cone. If they've heard of it but not really sure what it is, they stay with you in the middle. And this is a really good way of just doing some really quick assessment for learning so you know where your students are, so that you can then adjust your expectations and also make sure that you revisit things that they're not sure about. It's a really quick activity, and then at the end you can also do another bit of the same assessment with another knowledge line undertaking the same activity, and you can see how much they've progressed and whether they've learnt something extra or whether you still need to revisit some of those topics. Another introductory activity, or one just for assessing whether they've understood a learning point, is to use pair share. Now, they might do this in class. And one really important thing is that any of these teaching tools or pedagogies that you're using in class can be transferable to the outdoor area. So if you know that your learners like a certain pedagogy, then why not try and explore it in the outdoor environment as well? But with this pair share, if you get them in pairs, try and explain the learning point to their pair. Then they try and repeat it, but they make the explanation even better. Swap partners, try it again and try and make it even better. And you can continue with this until you think that your learners have got a perfect understanding of the learning point. So for example, you might say, you're going to say what area is. And somebody might say area is how big something is. When they go to another partner, they then expand on it and say the area is measured in meters squared. They then expand and say measure is width times length. So they're starting to get a better definition of the teaching point. And then you could actually get them to visualize it or actually to measure it. So you're building on that understanding in a practical way. If you want to get students into groups that all have the same idea, such as a prediction for a science investigation, then snowballing is a really good idea. Get each person to talk to one person and tell them what their prediction is. If they find somebody who has the same prediction as them, they then make a pair and they keep going round. If they find another pair that has the same, they join up as a 4. Keep doing that until as many groups as you can find have joined together so you have the smallest number of groups. You then only have to ask 3 different groups what their predictions are to find out what the variety of predictions are for the whole class. It also gets them to explain why they've made that prediction, so they've got to have some understanding to go with it. So sharing that understanding and also that movement associated with it will get them to really start drilling down to why they think that prediction is that way. If you can, try and get your students to lie down for the visualization exercise. First, get your students to snuggle down and get comfy on their backs and close their eyes. Ask them to listen to your voice and imagine. Imagine lying in a field, under a tree, or on a yard, wherever they're lying, and then take them from that place in their minds to another environment, which will be useful for you to set the scene for the outdoor learning session. This may be to take them to the Amazon jungle, floating them up through the tree canopy and down through the rainforest canopy, or taking them under the sea to see the animals living there, or under the earth to see rocks and fossils. It's a really good way to focus them on places that you haven't got in your school grounds by using their imagination. But make sure you get them to sit up very slowly so that they take their time to re-establish themselves back in this location. But use that inspiration to start to build on that outdoor learning experience, even if you haven't got those environments in your school grounds. One of the best ways to start an outdoor activity is actually to take a walk around your school grounds. This provides your learners the opportunity to look for locations to undertake the activity, but also the resources there are in the school grounds that might help them. It also provides you with a context for the learning. So it might help you to describe environments that you're going to be exploring, but also to see the contrast with places you can't explore. What's the difference between a desert and our location and the habitats we've got here in our school grounds? So taking a walk is a really good way of focusing the mind and to get them thinking about the wider area as a learning opportunity and a learning location. Trails are a good way to get some excess energy out of your students. If you want to start an activity and you want them to discover what they're going to be doing, you could set out either words or some clues around your whole school grounds and just get them to run and find them. This also gives you the opportunity to bring in some map reading skills and also some teamwork. And once they've found those things, they could then try and decipher it and work out what the challenge is on the outdoor learning. You can also place resources in places where you want them to use them. For example, if you're going to be doing some measuring or building shelters, and you want them to use trees, you could place those pieces of wood, or you could place that material, such as your tape measures, actually by the trees. And it helps them to associate the outdoors with that learning experience. If you want real lifelong learning that's in the real world, such as we do with a new curriculum, we need to consider every place as a learning experience. And that's what you're trying to embed in these students, that it doesn't have to be inside in school for them to learn. So use the whole area and get them to see what learning they could do in all of those different locations. It could be maths trails, it could be literacy trails. It's just a way of really using the whole of your school grounds so that you can show that learning can occur anywhere. Telling a story outside is a really good to start an activity. It can set the scene and the mood and the atmosphere that you want for the activity. If it's a story that they haven't heard before, then try and pick a spot which sets the scene that you've got inside the story. You're actually using that environment as a backdrop. And if you can find a little place where they can all pitch in and you can have a really immersive experience where you're all quite intimate, then it really will bring that atmosphere to life. So consider something like the Gruffalo. And when you're talking about in the woods, you actually do that and you walk through the woods. So try and bring that story to life by actually using the environment. Then your learners can understand that the outside can be used as inspiration for creativity. Teamwork activities are also a really good starter. Apart from anything, it teaches the students some good communication and working together in cooperation. So things such as trying to get them to order themselves into name order in the alphabet or into age order without talking to each other gets them to start cooperating and working together as a team. There's loads of team building activities, and if you start with that before you actually give them the learning activity, it will start to get them to gel and to work out those roles as a team before they start to do the actual activity that you're focusing on. You could also undertake some really fun activities such as shelter building or maze building, which are also really good at building good teamwork and communication skills. And again, give them the opportunity to build their roles within those teams, and then when they start the actual activity, then they know the dynamics within that team. So, top tips for starting out. Establish your muster points. Make sure you've got different ones for different conditions of the weather, and you test them out with your students so they know they work. Think about where you're standing when you're talking to your group so the weather is helping you and your students can see you, and it's going to be easy for them to concentrate on what you're saying. Undertake some immersive introductory activities so they can transition from inside to outside by clocking all the distractions around you at the very beginning so you're not distracted later. And then start with some starter activities so you can set the scene. Make sure you're using the outdoors as a resource to inspire you for the learning, and you're using as much of the area as you can. And then hopefully your students will learn more and more skills at being effective outdoor learners.